Hey guys, I am your host, Damien Stevens, and you are listening to MSP Mindset. I'm really excited to talk about a really tough time and a really tough subject. I'm just incredibly excited about something that's very tough. And I think the reason is because Eric's been through it. And I don't wish it on anybody, but he's come through it and not only survived, but thrived. So today we have founder and CEO of Proteck Support, Eric Woodard. And what we're going to talk about today is that he experienced a supply chain buffalo attack, whatever fancy words you want to call it. But basically, a vendor, namely an RMM, was the source. And it managed to give every single client he had, 100% of his clients, ransomware, I believe all the same day. And the backup vendor he counted on wasn't quite what he thought. So what do you do when your core tooling fails, or when every client gets ransomware, or when everybody's stressed, or however you want to think about that? Now, I don't like to just talk about a problem. I want to understand, what do we do about it? Because there's lots of problems. Why don't we try to help? So Eric has been so kind to give us his takeaways. So you don't have to go through what he went in order to learn these tough lessons. So I'm really excited to welcome anybody that's listening. Please give a thumbs up, whatever you like to do, and show your support for Eric. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I kind of teed this up. One thing I'll say, and I want to ask the first question. By the way, we have a ton of questions that have already come in from people that have registered. I'm going to get to as many as possible. If you're listening live, get your comments in now, because there's going to be probably more questions that we can take today. But I want to do the best to do that. So I want to find out what really happened, Eric. One thing I will say as a disclaimer is we're not going to name names. We are here to learn from this, not to throw somebody under the bus. So if you want to know this or the name or that name, that's not what we're here to talk about. So I guess let's start at the beginning, Eric. How'd this start? When did you first learn about it?
Well, it's been a while now. February 4th of 2019, we had someone get into our on-premise RMM, and they were able to get in through a vulnerability with a vendor and get into our back end of the database, turn off 2FA, log in, and replace our EDR with the ransomware. GanCrab was the ransomware at the time. And we distributed to about 1,700 endpoints in about 30 minutes. And then it went to work and started encrypting files, and we encrypted about 75 million files in just a few hours. So a moment in time I'll probably never forget. And that's how they got in. It was through a vulnerability, and they used us as the delivery vehicle out to all of our clients. So that's kind of the starting point, if you will. And as you can imagine, clients are calling in. We got up to 1,000 calls per hour.
Oh
Hey,
my
what's
gosh.
happening? And the thing that's also a little side note here is all of our systems were also encrypted. So our
Yeah.
PSA, our RMM server, all these things were also encrypted, our PCs. And so we were kind of dead in the water, and trying to unravel what happened.
Wow. So give me some sense. You gave a lot of numbers, right? 1,700 endpoints. You encrypted the 75 million files in a few hours. That's amazing. In a bad way. You started getting 1,000 calls an hour. I can't even understand that. But to give us some context about how many clients did you have and about how many employees? Because 1,000 calls an hour for 1,000-person organization is no big deal. Uh,
Sure. Yeah, so at that time, we were probably about 15 people,
okay.
probably just under $3 million in revenue, top line. And yeah, so we moved to a cloud phone system just a little while before that. So, things didn't ring busy, if you will. We just, we took the phone call. Yes, we're aware. Yes, we're working on it. Stay tuned for more information. So that's all we could do at first because we didn't actually know how they got in. I mean, in hindsight, it's obvious it was the RMM, but at the time we weren't positive how they got in. We weren't
Right.
positive another one of our tools got hit. We weren't positive, where the infection was and so on. We knew that it was our systems. So I remember I was actually at home this day. I had a cold and I was on a sales call and my phone just starts burning up like 911, 911, 911. People in my office saying, "Hey, we've gotten ransomware." I'm like, well, that's not good. I got off the sales call real quick and I'm driving in the office and I call Chris Lair, which I'm sure many people know, with Solace, an incident response company. And he's just like, well, are your customers hit? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know that yet. And I couldn't get through to people. I live about 15 minutes away from the office. When I walked in, it was pretty gloom. Everyone knew that all of our clients had been hit. And, the interesting thing about it is because our RMM server was also ransomware, we only distributed out ransomware for about 30 minutes. So the endpoint had to be on during that 30 minutes, which all servers were on. And so that's how we deployed, and anyone that had their stuff off at that time were safe. And so, we jumped into, okay, what are we going to do now? And that's where the second part of the story, I guess, begins. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's a like I said, a moment I'll never forget, and that's kind of phase one of the story.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is this has been years, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing what really happened because I know it's not easy. We were talking behind, before we went live backstage, and it's just like, who wants to ever deal with this? Whoever wants to think about it. So there was gloom there when you walked in, I'm sure, from the team, right? You're crippled in your ability to even do things. I think of crippled as we're locked out of theirs and our network is running, but there's a different level when your systems are encrypted. That's a whole different level. What was your thoughts and what did, at that point?
There was kind of like this moment where I pulled everyone in the office and I just said, we have to decide, are we going to fight this thing? What are we going to do? Because we were the first MSP pop. So, this news didn't go just, it hit Twitter, it hit Reddit, it went national and then international. But we had this moment where like, hey, are we going to fight this thing? And we all just kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, let's fight this thing. It's not going to be pretty. And, call your families, let them know they're not going to see you for a while. And we decided to buckle down and fight this. And so we, started, okay, we need to start restoring systems. This is back when MSPs didn't have very good IR plans and things. We had an IR plan, just to be totally transparent. It was a one-page IR plan if we had a problem. We did not have an IR plan or a book to talk about what happens if all of our clients get hit. So, as I go through the lessons learned in a little bit, that was one of the first things is, I looked at our IR plan. We're like, yep, okay, we'll check through that. But it's just a different scale when it's all of your clients.
Yeah, I don't think most people have. Not everybody's got an incident response plan for. Unfortunately, it's easier to sell to your clients than maybe do yourself. So you were in a lot of ways ahead of having one for your own company, your own MSP, because we always try to take care of our clients before ourselves, unfortunately.
Sure.
And most nobody's got one. So that was one of the questions. Did you have one that Dave Freeberg asked? So thank you for asking that. One, before you kind of move on, I wanted to ask from Lee. Lee Hanger asks, do you know how long the ransomware was there or idle before you saw anything happen?
Great question. So they actually came in from a IP address in Chicago, and they were in for no longer than 30 minutes. So they got in, they found our EDR product. They removed that executable. They put in the executable 198.exe, which I'll never forget. And then our RMM very efficiently distributed that out to all of our endpoints, and it went to town. one little thing I'd like to share that, not being defensive, but I think this speaks to people a little bit differently, is I like to tell what we had in place. Because unfortunately, a
Please.
lot of, what's that?
Yeah, please do. Because the better we understand, and your story, I want you to tell it, but you weren't asleep at the wheel. There's some MSPs that are, and I'm sure you beat yourself up at times over what you wish you'd done, but that's what people need to hear. Like, I think some people hear an MSP got popped and they go, well, that's the one that probably wasn't even
Yeah,
running AV internally, or, something like that.
sure. So, this is back in 19. So this is quite a while ago. We had a next gen EDR. We had SIM SOC. We had a firewall with security services. We had long passwords. We had 2FA. All the servers were patched. Our products, our RMM, our PSA were patched. So, the news, when the story broke, there was a known vulnerability that everyone just assumed that was not patched, and that was incorrect. But once that goes out there, it spreads like wildfire, right? So we were not asleep at the wheel. I mean, is there things we could have done better? Absolutely, right? There's always things we could be doing better, but we actually had a pretty good. We were quite a bit ahead of our peers on security, and it just goes to prove that it's not if, it's when. And really, the goal here is to be cyber resilient and not cyber proof. If there's one thing I look back that I really oversold or fooled myself, was putting too much stock in Proteck, right? You need to identify, you need to have a response, you need to, have a recovery plan. It's not just about Proteck. And I think that, whether it was fooling myself or just listening to vendors that, hey, if I build my wall high enough, no one can ever get over the top. And that's true. They just go underneath, right? And so, it was that was probably one of the biggest things, is you have to protect, right? I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying, like, that's one piece of five of the pillars, right? So, that was one of the big surprises, I guess, if you will, of like, oh wow, I had all these things in place, but it was not enough.
Mm. So what then? What were the next steps?
So we had ransom note on every computer. So every computer got its own unique ransomware serial number, and it married
Mm.
it to the computer. And so we figured that out pretty quickly, and we started. I got a PowerShell programmer to start compiling. Okay, we're going to grab this ransom note. We're going to go marry it up with a decryptor, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then I have to run that specific decryptor on that specific computer. Right? It's not a generic decryptor. So first thing we did. Well, actually, let me just go to phase two of the story here. We called our backup vendor and we said, hey, you need to prepare to spin up 200 to 300 servers. Okay. It's a product I've used for years and years. We had lots of, super certified engineers. We did backup testing regularly. Note on that, we did it for one client or one set of files or one server. We never thought about doing it for 200, 300 servers.
Right.
Anyways, I call this vendor, say, hey, get ready to spin this up. And there's just this long pause on the phone. They're like, well, let me go get the management. They get the management on. They're like, hey, we can maybe spin up a dozen for you. And I just remember, like, the blood ran out of my face. And I had a couple of people in my office. And, we just looked at each other like, oh my gosh, like, this is a lot worse than we thought. So we did try to spin up a few in their cloud. So this is a vendor that had a product and then they had a cloud offering, and the cloud completely failed, like just completely failed. We brought up 5 servers for one client, and they were totally unfunctional. They were so slow. The vendor later said that they were doing maintenance. And so, love to hear that after the fact. And so I said, hey, I need bare metal restore drives, right? Give me my data, give me my customers' data. And this vendor had a system that could only produce 1 terabyte of data in a 24-hour period. We had 88 terabytes up in their cloud. So even if they did things well and it had a very good process, which they did not, to get us out, we're 88 days to get all of our data back. Long story short, it took them 5 days to get us our first 1 terabyte. And guess what that was? That was our PSA. That was our RMM, right? Like that was the first thing we had to bring back up.
Sure.
And so once I got that news and I came to grips that like backups this is not going to be a fast thing. We, the help with Solace and Chris Lair, we negotiated with the attackers to just pay the ransom. So I can't remember the exact figure, but it came out to be, I don't know, 20,000 a PC or something. It was going to be $3.8 million. And after negotiations, it got down under $100,000. Okay. So this is on a Monday. I cracked the piggy bank. I paid the $100,000, having no idea if my insurance is going to cover. No idea. And then the attackers get it, and they're like, okay, this is the biggest deal that we've gotten, and I don't want to generate all these keys. I'm waiting for my programmer to get back into town to write a script to generate all these keys because this is our biggest hit, right? And so this is on Monday.
This is stranger than fiction. This is stranger than
Right.
fiction, right? That's crazy.
So Tuesday, I ask them, hey, where are the keys at? So this happened on Monday. Tuesday, I'm like, hey, we paid you. Where are the keys? Bitcoin had to, process. And then Wednesday, I'm like, hey, I paid you. Where are these keys? And they called me a couple names and went dark. Like, you were asking too many questions, blank, blank. And then they went dark. So Thursday passes, Friday passes. Okay, all of our clients are down. We're down. And then Saturday night, about 10 o'clock at night, we get I have the attackers chat window up and ding, ding, ding. Here's all your decryption keys. And so we get them, we go grab the first one, we go try it, airs out like that. We're like, oh no, like this is, terrible. And so we chat back. Oh, so sorry. Let me do this on my Windows device instead of my Mac, and that should work better. 15 minutes later, here can the zip file with all the decryption keys, and they did work. So, so Monday happened. Saturday night is when we got the decryption keys, and then the real work began. So the attackers actually made good and delivered on their product sub 1 week. My backup vendor never made good, and it took that. I mean, they were giving us back data for 6-9 months, something like that, and yeah, there's another whole story to how bad the backup recovery process was. 5 days to get our first one. We just kind of said the heck with it and went down the decryption route. So
that's crazy.
That's kind of phase 1 and phase 2. So there's the bloodbath.
Yeah, and we're not going to name names, but these are both the top RMMs and top backup providers. So, and I don't say that to scare you. I say that we all need to be better as MSPs and as a vendor, better prepared for this kind of thing. So before we kind of move any further, I wanted to jump in and share what Neil asked here. And so Neil's asking, was this vulnerability published by the vendor? And if so, had mitigation been recommended prior?
Yeah, so this was a known vulnerability with a patch. So we did have it patched, but the vulnerability, it wasn't a significant enough patch. In other words, it did block a lot of the attacks, but it did, we were still hit. So in other words, the patch didn't patch all the way. It patched a lot of it, but not all the way. So, it came out. I believe there's even a CVE on it. So it was a connector between RMM and PSA, and that's where it got hit. That's where the vulnerability was at. And someone found it a year and a half earlier, patched it. We were patched, and we still got hit. So yes and no.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to what you've shared before, which is, my take on this is you weren't asleep at the wheel. You had patched the issue. You had, in 2019, not even today, but a lot of people didn't have next gen EDR and a SIM and a SOC and patched. And so, the point is like you're going to make, I'm sure, is it doesn't matter how you build that wall, right? So this is crazy. I want to go back to one point you negotiated somehow. I guess you said, in Chris Lair, whoever was involved, down from 3.8 million to 100,000, which is wonderful. And then, if I understand right, you parted with 100,000 out of your bank account, not knowing probably if your customers were going to pay you, if they're going to pay you, like all kinds of other unknowns where you probably needed to keep the cash and didn't know if the insurance provider would provide. So if I understood that right, I just want to understand that.
I mean, that was luckily we were healthy enough of a company that we could go break the piggy bank and get that cash out. Though, the irony is it was billing day. So we were actually sending out invoices to our clients, and we couldn't send them out for that month because our systems were down. But yeah, you're 100% right. We went and paid that ransom, not knowing what the future held. If there is a silver lining in my story, is we had a cyber liability policy, and then we moved to a different one, and they overlapped by 4 days. And that's when we were hit. So I was actually able to tap out both of those cyber policies, and that's why we're still standing. So just talk about a divine hand or luck or whatever you want to call it. That was one of the reasons we were standing. Now, it's really interesting. I reached out to both of them, and one of them took like 3 days to get back to us. The other one got back to us immediately. So it's really interesting that some insurance were more prepared for this type of thing and others were not. They got us, breach counsel, and they got us, some help, and off to the races.
That's amazing. Well, guys, as you're listening, Neil, we featured your question. Keep them coming. We'll get as many as we can. Eric, you got me whenever you want. We are going to share, if you registered with this after, but we're also going to share some of this real time. So whenever you're ready, we can kind of cover, because I know you've laid out what some of the top things you've learned.
Let me. I'll finish a couple more gory points about the story, and then we can kind of talk about what to do about it.
Please.
So we were a 24/7 shop for 2 months. I brought in techs from several states. Even incident response person came on site for 2 weeks, and we were 24/7 just decrypting. So we wrote PowerShell commands to decrypt and then start multiple decryptors. We had a huge math problem, as Gary Pica would say, where the decryptor could only decrypt like 1,000 files an hour, but we encrypted 75 million in just a few hours. So their encryptor was amazing. Their decryptor was horrendous. And so we had to write PowerShell to sit there and run multiple shot PowerShell until the PC crashed. Then we'd have to put some variables in for performance, so hit at 90%, and kind of go through the decryption process. Now, we were lucky. We did not have any data exfiltration, so this was a lock and load, and the ransomware didn't have the ability to exfiltrate. So I guess another silver lining in the story there. And we went to decryption mode. Of course, started with servers. One thing that's a very difficult thing to do is which of your clients is going to come up first. So something for you to think about as MSPs. Is it the most litigious ones? Is it the biggest revenue? Is it the most profitable? Is it the ones that are in the most pain? We chose a kind of a combination of a few things: most pain and most impact, I guess. Litigious was a thing. These things bring out the best and worst in people, which I'll talk about in a minute. We went into decryption for 2 solid months. We were 24/7 shop, where we just decrypted, PC at a time, server at a time. These decryptors would crash. It was terrible at decrypting SQL. Good news is when the SQL databases that were running, it actually couldn't encrypt them because it was a locked service. So, mixed successes with the decryption, but for the most part, I think we got 99% of everything decrypted. I had an IR company. I had a crisis communication company. I had actually 2 attorneys, and I was on the phone with clients, beating down my door, calling me on my cell phone. Literally a phone up to each ear for 15 hours a day for the first 2 weeks. Sometimes I just let them vent. Sometimes I let them threaten me, and I'm going to go different MSP. I'm like, look, there's no one more vested in this world to get you up and going than us. But if you want to, that's fine. I guess one little data point that a lot of people ask, I think it's one of the questions, is how many customers did we lose? We lost about 10% of our clients. And, another lesson learned, cyber insurance coverage only does business loss for the 30 days after that you get hit. Well, these customers left 6 months later. You don't switch MSPs in 30 days,
No,
right? So the business loss.
nobody will do that. That's right.
Yeah. So we lost about 10% of our clients. A couple of them were like good riddance. Clients come in different forms. Some were sending us pizza saying, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry. Let us know what we can do." And some were screaming and yelling and threatening and kill. I had one client bang at our door because we have a locked facility. Banging at our door, walked in and handed me an invoice for $100,000. That's how much money I've lost today. I need a check right now. And I'm just like, I'm super sorry, but that's why I have cyber and coverage. You need to show your damages to my cyber, and then your attorney and their attorney fight it out. Let's you and I stay friends. We'll let them put on the gloves and fight. So yeah, just different reactions from different people. But yeah, it was a pretty intense few months. Of course, we were flat for that year. Then the next year was COVID. COVID was a piece of cake, by the way, compared to the ransomware event. Like all my people are like, this is no big deal, right? I guess one thing that was pretty awesome is I retained all my staff. They were 100-hour plus weeks, and some of them, we had people sleeping over and everything like that. We retained all the staff throughout, so I guess got hit, the ransomware, we got the decryptors, our backups completely failed us. Then we worked to decrypt everything and get everyone up into a functional state again. The worst part of the whole thing was going and meeting with every client and doing a postmortem. So I don't get choked up here, but I can tell you, I went and met. I had an account manager would go with me, and we would go to these clients, and we'd have these meetings. Like, you hired us to protect you. We didn't. The backups we thought were good, they were not. And I will let you out of any agreement we have. We failed you. This is what happened. This is why it happened. This is what we're doing to stop this from ever happening again, at least the same way. And do you still want to be friends? That's literally what the conversations were. And some of them were tear filled. We lost a lot. I had a trucking company. They had 100 trucks around the U.S. Couldn't tell where they're at. They couldn't pay payroll. They went and got $40,000 out of the bank and handed out $100 bills for payroll. So we had that kind of situation. And then we had some that are like, hey, we went back to paper. It was a great learning experience. We're doing things differently now. So anyways, we had to meet with every client. And I remember walking out of those meetings just exhausted. And we had one where we did 2 in one day. And I remember going out of the client after the second one of the day and pushing their door open. And when I pushed the door open, I almost collapsed. Like I literally, my knees were buckling, and I had to hold the door to hold me up because I was so emotionally exhausted from having to have these horrible conversations. Again, not all of them were horrible. A lot of people thought that we handled it like a champ. Other people are like, oh, I read this Reddit article, and you should have done this and this and this, and all sorts of different things. I can tell you the unemployed IT people are the meanest people in the world. Those are the people that would just tackle you. If you would have had XXY storage backup product, this never would have happened. If you would have had this never would have happened. And just attack after attack. I actually had a contact us page on our website. I had to take it down because people were pinging people through LinkedIn and everything. And so yeah, it was a battle of emotions. I went into a dark place for about 1.5 years, man. I didn't even want to talk to anyone. I'd go home and I would fake like things were okay with the fam, but man, I didn't check in with friends. I was in a dark spot. You went to the point, got a counselor and walked through some of this stuff because it took a while, even though it wasn't quote my fault. You still feel like a failure, right? You failed your clients. You put your clients through hell. You put your people through hell. And so it took a long time to really kind of get out of that and then, build yourself back up stronger. I use the example of I'd go into one client, I'd come out and I'm like, okay, I'm that much better. I'm 1% better than when I went in there. And just doing that day after day after day after day, pulling myself back out. I'm kind of an optimistic person, and it was a bad place to be when I didn't have that optimism. And so, yeah, pulled myself out, and it took a good 2 years before I would get back on social, before I wanted to talk to friends, before I wanted to get new customers, and so on. So, yeah, a huge emotional side to it as well.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, Eric, and I know that's the short version, right? I can't imagine. I can't imagine I can't imagine it happening, and I can't imagine how you summon the courage to go in and get, even the postmortem, even after things were running, right? Basically, go and get, beat up or, just flogged for why you couldn't have. And I'm sure that there were exceptions, but just knowing that that's probably what you felt like you wanted to. I know I would have felt like I had let them down, even though you didn't do anything to cause it. Clearly, there was a vulnerability. You had patched it. I think probably using language like commercially reasonable efforts, you made all of those. Like, I'm not an attorney, but it seems like you did that and even more. The fact that you and an account manager would continue to show up just blows my mind, because it seems like even if you got them up and running, you'd be like, hey guys, we're just going to avoid you, and just try to not be so present in such a bad moment. So it's just, the other things is it's just I want folks to learn from this, but I also just feel like, whether it's keep showing up for your clients, keep showing up for your staff, part with that cash without having any idea of if you were going to get decryptors, if the insurance was going to pay. And then especially during such an uncertain time, because even if you had a piggy bank, like you said, break the piggy bank, you couldn't build that much. And obviously I'm sure at that idea, you had no idea if you'd retain any clients.
Yeah.
And what I love about this and you is it sounds like your team didn't really flinch when they said, we got to go do the right thing and try to battle. Because I have talked to MSPs that said, if this happens, I just give up and I'll file for the insurance claim.
Yeah. So I will throw one vendor out there, and that's Huntress. They actually called, I wasn't even a customer, but they called my aide that night and said, hey, let's figure this thing out. And 11 o'clock that night, we figured out the smoking gun, right? I had all three founders of Huntress on there. So super cool that they did that, and we figured it out. But, different vendors wanted me to keep quiet. Like, this didn't really happen. And other vendors kind of stood up and helped us out. Lots of uncertainty. I'm in a peer group. I have my peer group members helping and things like that. But I remember one specific moment where I'm like, we're doing good, and I think my company's worth X, say $1 million, just some hypothetical value. I think, if I was to sell it, I could get $1 million, and I know what I'm doing for my future. And I remember thinking, like, I'm not, when this happened, I'm not worth $1 million. I'm worth negative $4 million right now, because I've got all these people threatening all these lawsuits and everything. So, it's a pretty bad day when, I lost $5 million today. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, my staff were amazing. No griping, no complaining. Everyone just buckled down and did it, which was amazing. Another little lesson learned is insurance sees salary people. So everyone's working 100, 150 hours a week. Well, they reimbursed me for hourly people working those extra hours. They don't reimburse you for salary people. So I had all these salary people. I'm broke right now, right? And I have all these people doing 150 hours a week, and I can't pay them anything extra because insurance is saying, nope, they're salary. That's just part of the gig of being salary. The hourly people were the ones getting, huge paychecks, right? And so, yeah, it was a lot of lessons learned you never would know until you're in the fire and in the trenches there.
Well, I want to switch to going through some of the pieces if you're ready, but before I do, just because there's so much value there, how the heck did you? A lot of people can't manage to keep people during good times, at least all their staff. And this was, if ever there was a test, this was it. Who wouldn't want to leave working 150 hours? And especially when you were probably working 150 hours just to get yelled at, probably not the best time, even when you work that hard.
Yeah.
So how can I learn from that?
I think, and this is one of the lessons learned is, you have to invest in culture all the time and beforehand. I couldn't go invest in culture the day this happened. I
Hmm.
start treating people right, right? Like
Way too late.
I filled their buckets earlier on, right? I can tell you a lot of MSPs did put things on their website. We've been hit. Go find another support. We're done. We didn't have cyber coverage, so I knew of those. Yeah, amazing people. They stayed around. We called our dispatcher the human shield to all of us. I mean, she just with a smile on her face, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I know, isn't this terrible?" And she would just say that over and over and over and over, hundreds of times an hour. As these calls come in, and then we had people behind the scenes and people writing scripts and people getting creative. And one pretty cool story is I actually had a local competitor that caught wind of it. And he's like, "What do you need?" I'm like, "Well, all of our BDRs are all encrypted." And he came in the next day. He's like, "Okay, I've got 4 servers here. They all have 5 terabytes. Here's the password. Now you can use this to go get clients, fired back up." And so, awesome stories of that. And then I had other competitors that would go into our clients and they would run netstat, and that's like just a DOS window, and it shows everything that's running. He's like, "Look at all these hackers in your system. This is what's they haven't got out." And it was like Dropbox, Microsoft, all the stuff that is
Right.
supposed to be running. So yeah, I get a lot of you see who shines and who uh, wants to beat you down when you're already down. So pretty interesting find there.
Well, we're going to protect the guilty, but if you want to share the MSP's name or any of these others, please do, because like those are the unsung heroes. And then the thing is, like, so many people asked, "What do you do?" Asked me, asked others, and I'm like, there's so many lessons you're going to share, so I don't want to take away from that. But like, just having a friendly competitor or two could be the difference in staff or server or whatever it is. Just make a little bit of a difference, and I'm sure you'll never forget that.
Absolutely, and the people in my peer group, I was in a HTG at the time. They came to my aid and gave me remote hands. Another competitor actually sent a tech here for a day, and got him in all our tools, taught him how to decrypt and how to fix crash decryptors and things like that. And so, yeah, it was certainly a community effort. Huntress, that was pretty awesome. They came to our aid, and even some other ones like back then we were with Robin. She's like, "Don't pay your bill until you're on your feet." And Gary Pika, "Don't pay your bill until you're on your feet." So like, there are some awesome vendors, and then there's some like, "Hey, I'm going to send you a late notice. I can't pay anyone right now, but like, you can send me all the late notices you want, right? Give me a
That's right.
month to get back on my feet." So there's a comment from Aaron that he loves this community, and I agree. Like, I think this is a great community, and I got to see the results of that. And I wish all of our clients had equally good communities but a lot of our customers don't have that same community. So
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Aaron. Yeah, the community makes the difference, and I appreciate your courage to step up. I can't imagine any other response because I guess we're wired more similarly there, Eric. But I have unfortunately talked to MSPs that say, I don't really need to test that well, or I have a plan just to cover the commercial reasonable effort, but that's what insurance is for.
right.
And I guess you've learned firsthand that it doesn't cover everything. And I don't know, even if it did, why would you give up not trying to help your client and fight?
Yeah, I mean, these are people that we're 11. The time this happened, 9-year-old business. Like, these are the people that build us up. We owed it to them to get them functional. Even if they didn't stay with us, we owed it to them to, excuse me, to you know right the wrong, really. And we were the entry point of the wrong thing that happened. And so,
Sure.
you know, one other little cool side benefit is when I met with these clients, I had a couple say, we thought about leaving you, but the way you handled this, and we know that you can survive from this, like, why would we leave you and go to an MSP that hasn't been through this, right?
Yeah.
It's the more mature thinking clients that say that. And then I had one client's like, I always felt like you were a Cadillac service and we paid a little bit more, but the other clients, the other MSPs I looked at that were less money, I don't think they would have survived this. So I actually now I'm okay with paying your bill and stuff. So some we grew together and we're tighter, and some we grew apart.
Mm, that's well said. Well said. Well, I don't want to miss unpacking some of the nuggets. Is that all right to kind of transition and talk about some of
I
this?
think so. Really, the story still gives me an anxiety, a gut bomb, and when I talk about the story, and I do this to, it helps other MSPs, and so that's the whole reason I tell this story. But yeah, these points that we can kind of go over, kind of the takeaway message. I've gotten a lot of MSPs like, "Hey, I did that, and then we had this happen. I'm so glad you told me to do that." So I hope that a couple of these things hit a spot and things you might not have thought about, and you know people can value from this terrible experience.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, let's kind of dive right into a couple of things you were saying there, and just kind of pull this up because just this amazing gift that you're giving us, Eric. So we'll walk through this at whatever order or pace you want. If you've registered, you will get this download. But now's your time to be able to ask those questions. I can't tell you how much it means to me, Eric, that you're willing to go through this emotional anxiety all over again to share this. And the reason I was excited, yes, I'm a backup and DR vendor. So, I could say, look how bad some other person handled it. The more mature way is, what can I learn from it? What can I learn from Eric? What can I learn from other vendors? And the reason I'm doing this is not to tell a FUD story about fear, uncertainty, doubt. It's because there's some good, amazing stuff in here, in my opinion. So wherever you want to start, Eric, we'll take it.
Let's just start at the top. I've already kind of touched on it, but I would really encourage everyone to quit selling cyber proof and just sell cyber resilience, because it's not if, it's when. I'm a firm believer in this. I probably fooled myself that with enough protection this would never happen prior to this event. And I've talked to other MSPs that have had similar events and they feel the same way now. So don't focus just on protect. Look at the NIST 5 pillars. Identify, protect, detect, response, recover. So make sure you address all of those. So I think I've kind of touched on that one. We touched on the other one, but building your team ahead of time. You need to have a cyber attorney, or they call it breach counsel. You need to have an IR company picked out. You need to find your local FBI agent and make a relationship with them. Have some, being a peer group of some sort. You need to have a team behind you for when it hits the fan. Like it's without the team, I never would have done this. And really, it was the team that pulled me through more than it was me. So build that team ahead of time. Find out who your key vendors are. Do everything you can to have that team assembled when you need them.
Sure.
Communication. Be careful how you communicate. So we got a list of things we could and could not say. Unfortunately, we got that day 2. We had said some dumb things before then, but you need to have a script of what your people can say. It's a security incident. It's not a breach. It's we're looking into it. We're aware. We're looking into this. Don't give diagnosis that, yeah, we think we did this and this and this and this. Like, you need to really limit your response and have an attorney review it. One thing that was super frustrating, but it is also one of the things that we got the most compliments on, is our clients. We told them every day at 6:00 p.m. we're going to send a status update. So the first ones are like, okay, this is what we've done, and we paid this, we got this, and this is what we found with backups. And they were very, we opened up and told them everything. Then attorneys get involved. They're like, oh, this is what you can say. And I remember just being furious that it's 6:00 at night, and all I can say is, we're working around the clock. We know this is impacting you. Thanks for your patience. Like, that's all we could say. And I remember just giving that out. One thing the clients really liked, though, is that every night at 6:00 we did send that out, even if it was the same dang thing as it was the day before. Meaning, no new news, but here's our heartbeat. We're still alive, right?
We haven't gone home, right?
Yep. So communication plans is a big thing. The next one is manage the process. Like, you think of the largest project you've ever done with servers or things like that. Like, This is a project that needs to be managed. You can't have 20 cowboys trying to do different things. You need to, well, hold up. You do this, you do that, come back, report. Let's see what this looks like. That didn't work, or we have new news. Okay, we're canning this plan. We're bringing this plan online. Let's meet in 2 hours and have another meeting. I'll tell you, the cadence calls, I mean, they're exhausting, but the attorneys and the insurance companies, all that stuff, cadence calls every 3 hours of what's happened because things unravel quickly. Like, oh, we found this cool thing. Now this is changing this whole trajectory. Oh, now we found this. We can't restore this. Like, having the cadence call, it's like you feel like you just get off a call and then you're on the next call, but a lot changes in that time. So you have to kind of manage that process. And you're not going to, I hope people remember this during it. You got to take notes. You think, oh, I'll remember this, but you have shock, you have adrenaline, you have chaos, and then insurance wants to know 4 days later, well, what did you do? Was that step 3 or step 4? And when did you communicate this to your clients? And when did you do that? I don't know. That was 5,000 fires ago. I don't remember what I did. So taking notes or having someone follow you around and take notes, because those notes are what saved me with the insurance company in a couple spots. Like, because they'll come back like, well, why did you take that action? I'm like, I don't know. Why did I take that action? They're like, well, you took that action. That was really stupid. And then we found the note. I was like, oh, we took that action because of this data point. And they're like, oh, okay. That makes sense, right?
That makes a ton
Community.
of sense.
I think I kind of, touched on that one. I can't emphasize it enough. The community is what saved us. And then distribute decision-making. Like, I was literally in my office on a phone, and I was out of the picture. And my people were sitting there waiting, like taking a ticket outside my office to talk to me and get approval for this and get approval for that. And finally I have to come in. All right, everyone, you have to make the decision that is the best for you, that you think is going to be the best. But I need you to put on some legal goggles. I need you to put on customer goggles, then put on Proteck goggles before you make that decision. But and talk to some of your peers, but you can't wait for me to make a decision. I'm completely unavailable right now. And so distribute that decision making was super important to do.
That makes a ton of sense.
I think there's a few more.
Let me scroll down. Before we jump in, I just want to mention one thing that this is, so I was an MSP. I used to know, not what Eric's went through, but I used to know this and how hard it is. And so, and I lost data and had to go look my client in the eye and tell them I don't have your backups. Not because I hadn't been checking them, not because they hadn't been fixed. Everything that was said, it was successful. Everything was verified. Everything said it was good. And that's what I learned. If it hasn't been tested, I don't trust it. And so just a quick kind of overview on Servosity. We do two things differently. Number one, we manage the backups for you. And what that means is you don't have to babysit backups, so you can gain that freedom. But it also means that we're an extension of your team when it comes to recovery. So your team can be doing recoveries, but we can be doing them entirely for you, and we don't even charge extra. So in the case of some events like this, a mass event, not only are the things like spin up everything in the cloud or ship a bunch of drives in parallel, but we have a team that is now in addition to your team. Can we do hundreds and hundreds of thousands of things at once? No, neither can you, but it's all about that team and that community, as Eric was just saying. So if that part is important, the other part is testing. I don't believe in a backup that hasn't been tested. We test daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly because I just don't trust even our own backups. And I want to know that when something happens, be it ransomware or just a deletion of a file, that it's ready. So lastly, if you're interested, ping me on social. Visit servosity.com/call if you just want to have a chat. I'm the founder of Servosity. Talk one former MSP to one current MSP. Be happy to talk kind of MSP to MSP. Lastly, we give away our entire process that I've spent the last 18 years building, so you can use any tool, not ours, to have tested, known, good backups. And so if you want to be prepared from a recovery perspective, and I can help in any way, you ping me. It's no cost. I'd be happy to give you that. I'm not sure it's quite as cool as what Eric's given us, but it's the least I can do to contribute to this community. So let's dig back in here and go back in here with Eric. So let's jump down here. We've kind of got the last 7 through 12. I think we covered the first 6. And so Brent is saying we're going to go to recording, how to jump on. Very informative. Thanks for saying that, Brent. I agree. It's been incredibly informative. Yes, you'll be able to get the recording. We'll make this and the this actual PDF that I'm showing right now available as well. So now is your only time to get questions from Eric, but we'll make this available to you. So tell us about culture, Eric. That seemed to be one of the biggest takeaways for me.
Yeah. So, again, just reiterate that culture is something you have to invest in before an event. So I was like a counseling center of these other poor MSPs that got hit. Like I knew that if I got a call at 2:00 in the morning, it wasn't good. And so I had all these MSPs calling, and it was super interesting to say, like, I'm going to fire my service manager right now. And I'm just like, okay, that's probably not. I mean, I get the gut check of, I want to solve whatever problem. The service manager opened up a port or didn't do this, but that's not what the company needs right now. So I do advise all business owners, and I've had to give some tough love to people who have gone through this. And I didn't realize this until after the fact, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but how the owner or the leaders respond to the crisis will determine the outcome. And so, I was told that I kept pretty cool. I think I yelled once, but it was hey, let's just get this figured out. Let's do this. Let's do this. It wasn't let's place blame and all those type of things. And so, other business owners that would call me and I'm gonna, clean house, and I'm gonna lose my house, and oh my gosh, and I've drinking a whole bottles of rum today, and like they're just like, I just have to say, look, you don't know me very well, but you need to pull your together so that you can, lead your team through this. Like they will determine what the next step is, and then, to pull that thread a little further, my clients would ask my employees how I'm doing, because that was what they're gauging if they were going to stay with us, is what the employees thought if we thought we were going to pull through. And so I think a lot of our clients stay just because they're like, hey, it looks like they still have a faith they're going to make it through this thing. We'll ride this thing out. So yeah, never underestimate culture in a lot of ways. So number 8, never whitelist. So people ask, why didn't your EDR catch this? Well, our EDR vendor followed our RMM's best practice to whitelist the RMM folder, to let the RMM folder do whatever it wants. I suggest to never whitelist anything ever for any reason and deal with the fallout. We had, I learned after the fact that it was whitelisted. It didn't look at it, didn't save it, even though behaviors were terrible, even though files were encrypted, the EDR is just like, hey, you said it's fine. So anyways, we moved to a different EDR that everything worked while not having it whitelisted. So I would not whitelist anything. I've had vendors come back, hey, I just need you to whitelist this one folder. No, not going to do it. So figure it out, or I'm figuring out another vendor. So number 9, this one's not super sexy, but super important. And that is review your contracts with your vendors and have an attorney review. They are one-sided a lot of times. And our backup vendors, like, no matter what we do, no matter if it was negligence or anything else, you can have a 1-month refund. That's the maximum amount of damages you can come after us for. Both of my cyber insurance policies wanted to take my backup vendor to the mat. They looked at that contract and they're like, you don't got a leg to stand on. I signed that thing 8 years previous, and I did not realize the redlining. I was naive. I do not sign any contract that's not redlined by my attorney now, and it slows down the process. And vendors hate it, but I don't. It's a non-negotiable for me now. 10. This one's very idealistic, and now maybe if someone like you guys have figured this out with Servosity, is testing at scale. I tested clients like, oh yeah, a server died and we brought a couple VMs up in our backup cloud and they kept going for 2 weeks and we got this thing figured out. You need to test at scale. And I know that is not super practical. And I wrote this a long time ago when I'm like, I'm going to find out a way, and I'm still finding out ways to try to test at scale with all of our different things. But yeah, as much as possible, test all your products, right? And what happens.
Yeah,
11.
we
Oh, go ahead.
just on that note real quick, Eric, my view is I'm doing the same things you would do if you built an entire team, an entire division with developers, and you had an entire knock or SOC type environment monitoring it. And my point in saying that is we have a few differences than the MSP, and those are some of them, but it's probably the same conclusions you'd come to. So, for example, most people don't even test cloud spin ups even once, unfortunately. I am outing a lot of you guys by saying that, but most haven't. So we include it every quarter for every client. In reality, they test one or two or three concurrently. The reality of even if we spun up all of them is, can you really test or check all of them? I mean, how long is that going to take you? A couple of weeks to even remote into, depending on, 1,700 endpoints, even if it was 150 servers. I don't know what the number is. That's not something you're going to do in one afternoon. So my point in saying that is there are things that I think we've improved along the way. And also just speaking for Servosity, it's not over. We need to continue to get better. We need to continue to do that. So anybody's listening, I'm welcome. I'm open to ideas. We continue to innovate, but those ideas often come from MSPs. So yeah, it's something that I think we do better in certain ways. And the other answer is we need to do better in other ways.
Absolutely. While we survived this thing, we still did 1,000 things wrong. We just happened to do 1,001 right? So, it wasn't by a landslide that we survived. I think I talked about the people. You're going to be the best and the worst. Some of your best clients become your worst enemies, and vice versa. Your employees, you see some, low performers just shine, and vice versa. So yeah, people are. You'll see crazy sides to people. Number 12, this one's super tactical, but don't use the same RMM on your BDRs as you do your production. Buy 200 licenses of something else and don't have any commonality between tools. Get them on separate VLANs. Only let your backup host talk to your VMware or Hyper-V host on one IP address. Lock that stuff apart, right? So that was everyone's like, well, why didn't you use your backup? Well, because they were encrypted too, right? And so make sure you protect your BDR. Ours is, again, when you have these things happen, you swing pretty far the other direction, right? So you have to 2FA to get in. You have to be on the right VLAN. You have to use a different tool, different EDR, whatever it takes to protect that BDR. And then the bonus there is if you can, IP restrict your tools. So we have our tools, our RMM now is IP restricted. Our documentation, IP restricted. So you can only get to it from this IP address. And then we use a product, kind of like a super VPN, to come into our office to get into the tools. So we also have SIM-SOC on our tools now. And we have, a bunch of different, indications of compromise within our tools. So if you can IP restrict, like that is a pretty awesome way to, decrease your risk. There's still risk, but it's going to make it more difficult to have to come from our IP to get into our RMM now.
Just to kind of drill down on that, IP restrict to your office, not to the US.
True that.
Is that the difference? Yeah. I know I've heard people say, I block all these countries. I have nothing to worry about.
Yeah. We got hit by Chicago, by the Russians through Chicago. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how you do it, is via your office. Is that what I'm understanding? Basically.
Yep. So our office, our data center, a couple of our homes, we have some failover and things, but yeah, like a lot of our key tools, and I'm hitting my vendors up all the time. Hey, I really want IP restriction. Hey, I really want IP restriction. Like, what do I have to do to upvote that? Because that's becoming, I want to get to a point that's a requirement. Unfortunately, I can't right now, but that's where we want to get with the management side of our tools.
That makes a ton of sense. This was amazing. I just can't imagine how crazy and stressful this must have been for you, Eric. And I did want to make sure we covered as many of those points. We'll make them available. I feel like I have 1,000 questions, to ask you. culture, everything else. I'm sure others do. We get to as many as possible. The several folks I see, Charles is saying, I'd love to get a recording. And so that means they're getting value. We'll definitely make sure to do that. So yeah, let's do that. I do have, a lot of questions about culture, other things. Also kind of on the IP restriction. Do you see it? Is it better? Like, I love your point of view. Not maybe there's right or wrong. Is it better to say everything has to go through one? In other words, I'm going to single sign on Okta, Azure, I don't know, whatever. And then we're going to guard that. And that way, basically I don't want vendors to have their own identity systems. I want to lock it down through, pick your vendor, Azure, Okta, whomever. And that's where you want to do that, because obviously, those vendors may or may not support things like IP restriction. Is that the way vendors should go? I'm listening. Should we have our own, especially if we're a backup vendor, be the only one that has our own, and then add IP restriction? And then that way, if your Okta, Azure, whatever is compromised, we're kind of following the different tooling path. So I'm asking both for myself and just for others.
I get this question from clients. Should I go to a small provider for my 365 or for my email, or should I go to 365? And which one's going to be attacked? I'm like, I don't know. Is your credit union going to be attacked, or is the bank going to be attacked? Whatever one's going to be attacked. So here's my 2 cents. And again, I'm coming from a, security standpoint. Is it's not all about protect, right? So if I use a single sign-on, now I have a centralized log. I can hopefully have some conditional access around signing into that. I for sure have 2FA to get into it. And then we need to have detection, what's out of the norm, right? So we have to identify what we need to protect. We have to protect it. Then we also have to be able to identify when things are off kilter or a bunch of logins all at once, or I usually don't log in at 2:00 in the morning, or whatever it looks like. So I love single sign-on. I wish everything was single sign-on. I know it's not always practical. I'm not a huge fan of the vendors doing their own single sign-on, because the last thing I want is multiple single sign-ons. I would rather have, a big one and try to keep everything in one spot, because it's just easier to look at logs and look at for IOCs or indications of compromise. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I love IP restriction just because it just takes a lot of the world out of the picture, right? So, if someone was to get my RMM, I have a very small focus of how could they have possibly gotten in, right? I have a very small scope to look at versus, the US or the world. And so these are my personal, thoughts on the matter. Are the more centralized, and for heaven's sakes, if you don't have single sign-on, like no 2FA is a showstopper. We will not even. Even if I have a contract with a vendor, I won't even use it. Like, it is a showstopper within our company here, that we will not use a product if there's not at least 2FA. Bonus for single sign-on.
Sure. Thank you for that. Got a couple questions. What's changed in terms of tools from Denon? I'm sure that's a broad question, but he asked about everything. Endpoint, servers, everything. Like, do you think this is more of a process and awareness or a tools challenge?
So I have 67 vendors, 67 tools we use. About half those are IT management tools, about half those are security tools. We did change tooling. You can't stay in the same EDR that you just had that happen. Yeah. Whether they did something wrong or not, like that, that name is no longer allowed in any of our clients, right? We did change RMMs, our PSA. That's a tough ask to change. We switch RMMs. We did switch backup products, surprisingly enough. We switched backup products. One of the first things I did with the backup product is you will be able to deliver these things in your SLA, or it's off the table. Redlining all of those vendors. I mean, it's an exhaustive process. It costs probably an extra $1,000, $2,000 with every vendor to have all the red lines go back and forth, right? But I feel way more protected as a company that if that vendor had a problem, they have to notify us. They're going to have some skin in the game. They're not going to put all the risk on us. There's going to be damages if they don't hold up their part of the bargain. And so, we've had to let some vendors go that won't play ball. It's a process. I think vetting tools as MSPs we're not great at. picking on myself. You go to a show, oh wow, that's going to solve that problem. I bring it on. Maybe I train people, maybe I don't. What we've done, and this is very much a work in progress, is we're doing the CMMI, the Continuous Maturity Model Index, or whatever it is, and we define what does the tool look like in an immature state, in a managed state, optimized, and so on. And we decide what it looks like. We decide how far down the road do we want to take this tool, because maybe there's not the ROI if we take it all the way up to the most mature state, but we're going to define what are the states we're looking at and where are we going to go with this tool. And the people and the process are more important than the tool. The tool is just one piece. You really should get the people and the process figured out and then go for the tool selection. Unfortunately, speaking of myself, we did that backwards. We go find a tool and then we try to, all right, who's going to own it? All right, everyone's just going to own it, which means no one owns it.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. Unfortunately, I've done the exact same thing, unfortunately, more than once, because it's a nice, shiny new tool.
Yep.
I want to try to get one or two questions in. I know we don't have forever. We got a question from Bob Miller. What's the average weight of a South American swallow? So he wanted to give you that question. I think Bob.
I don't know, Bob. You're going to have to help me on that
one. You give me a better one, which I think is amazing, right? How did you mentally work through this compromise?
Oh, so yeah, it was, I'm 46. It was probably the darkest area of my life. I had a situation where my dad died unexpectedly, and lawsuits with brothers and things. And I feel like that might unfortunately kind of prepared me to, deal with attorneys and stress and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of had this like first event that was kind of dark. And then I had this event, which was super dark. And, I was a little more prepared by going through that first event. So, I don't recommend this path for everyone, but, I guess one of the biggest takeaways here is you just have to take this crap and make it, you have to become stronger from it, right? I went and got my CISSP. I revamped, we're following CIS controls, like all these things. Like I used to not want to talk about this to anyone, especially like potential clients and things. Now I'm just like, hey, this happened. We survived it. We're better for it. We're a stronger company. Everyone here is united. Like if I bring in a new security process, there's not a soul here that balks about anything. They're like, whatever we have to do to not live through that, we will do. And so, it's that incremental fight of I have to fight to get 1% better. And then the next day I have to keep fighting to get 1% better. And then the next day I have to fight and I have to get 1% better. And it is just long and slow and arduous and painful. But then, at some point you look back, you're like, hey, I'm 20% better than I was a month ago. Right. And so it's a fight. Like I don't really have any magic other than it's a fight. I did go to, a counselor and, talk through why I had guilt when it wasn't really, serving me and really wasn't warranted. So I did that for a few months and that helped. And again, I walked out of that office. I'm like, well, I just spent $200. Do I feel any better? Well, maybe 1% better. Well, that's 1% more that I just climbed out of this hole. Right. And then, I took it and it went down, climbed out, and then, keep that process of keep climbing. And, we've matured a lot as a company and we are strong. And, I'm not ashamed to talk about it. I think myself and Robert Chaffee are the only ones that are really public about these wide, huge black eyes, if you will. But, trying to make some good out of some really crappy situation.
Well, speaking of that, thank you for that, because we are learning from something that I hope none of this listening has to go through. I would love to say I hope nobody ever goes through. I think that's incredibly unrealistic. And even if you don't go through it, preparing, take these lessons that Eric shared. If you don't, then you've been given the tools from Eric, who's given, his blood, sweat, tears, emotion, everything to it. So the least we could do is put this together and make it available for you using Eric's knowledge and know-how. I did want to talk about where are you now, right? You not only survived, you've become a CISSP, you're working on CMMI. Answer that question however you want, but it sounds like you've come out the other end, however dark that middle was, and you've not only survived.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are better and we're stronger because of it. Like, I think that we've talked about it as a company, and that's a believed statement here. And I have newer employees that are like, seems like you guys have a little tighter bond, all the people that went through this together. And it's true to a point. I mean, again, not trying to pat myself on the back, but it helped us figure out our messaging and what we'll accept and what we will not. Clients that won't invest a certain level in their security, they're just not our clients anymore. We did grow by about 30% last year or this year. So, we are back on a good cadence. But we had a couple flat years between COVID and this event. But yeah, we're back. We're not on top. We're not. There's still 1,000 things we need to do better. But we're doing EOS. We revamped our service desk and got some consultants there. Like, we're fighting the fight, and things are going pretty well for us. So this was just a stepping stone to do better things, and hopefully we never forget the lessons we learned there. And it's a very much a security first mindset when whatever we do here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Eric. Obviously, the tightest bonds are forged in the toughest situations. So I imagine that's an incredibly tight team you have. And I'm sure you wouldn't recommend this path for anyone, but I think the fact that your team came through it with you says the world about you, that you didn't throw the towel in when it would have been so easy, and probably a lot of people would have encouraged you just to avoid showing up, avoid coming in, avoid having the phone call, avoid having that postmortem, avoid. I'm not saying that's good, but I think that would have been the much easier path. So I am, just astonished and just fired up because you didn't, and you did what is the right thing. You stepped up and fought, and you didn't say we're perfect. And that's just an amazing thing. So last thing I wanted to ask real quickly is, Andrea says, what's changed the most about you throughout this?
What's changed the most about me? I mean, I could list 100 security ideas that I live by now. But me personally, more battle hardened, but at the same time more vulnerable, because like this could have happened to anyone. Gosh, that is a good question. I guess in the big picture, it made me realize how important it is to step up and be a leader in your organization. I remember the first few years of business, I just want to be everyone's friend, right? No, I'm not your boss, I'm your friend. And sometimes you do need a leader, and it's made me have to get into very uncomfortable situations and learn how to be a better leader. Still have a long ways to go, but that you need to learn how to influence people to lead them to better things, whether for themselves or through a hard situation. So I think that's probably the best answer I can come up with on the fly. Certainly something to reflect on.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, Eric, thank you for the gift of your time. How could folks get connected to you if they would like to?
LinkedIn's probably the best way. Just put a little note that you saw me. I usually, like to know who I'm connecting with. Again, a paranoid, security-minded person, but we have a few connections in place. Send out something. Let me know what helped, like what resonated, so that I can share that more often on these things. This thing happened, almost 5 years ago, and I've spoken in lots of different forums and things, and I'm still surprised how many people haven't heard the story or, didn't think about this or that. So let me know what resonated the most so that I can continue to share that.
We're sharing Eric's LinkedIn in the comments. So if you're watching live or listening to it later, finally, I just personally want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for being willing to be so vulnerable about a tough time and not just saying it never happened, or we are so egotistical and proud that it wasn't our fault, or we didn't do anything, or any of that, but stepping up and doing that, and not only sharing a tough situation, but having lessons. I know I'm not the only one. For example, Vaughn said he did have to run, but just thank you. It's super informative. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here, Eric. Everybody's listening live. Please, drop a comment, hit like, hit thank you, drop them an email, show your support. This drops as a podcast. So if you're listening to it later, take a minute, send a note to Eric, let him know if this meant anything to you. He's a real human running a real business. I can't thank you enough for being here, Eric. I've learned a ton. And if you've learned a tenth of what I've learned on this one, then this was just an amazing blessing and gift. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me. And I hope that some of these things really help people and we can keep fighting the fight out there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. Well, guys, stay tuned. On a little lighter note, 2 weeks from today, we're going to have the infamous, the well-known, perhaps best-known person in the channel, Rob Ray. And he's not going to give his normal talk track. It's going to be about unlocking AI specifically for MSPs. So that is 2 weeks from today. In other words, a week after we all fill ourselves full of Thanksgiving. And it is actually, to correct the date, a Thursday, November 30th. This says Friday. It is Thursday, November 30th. So just to make sure, even though it says the wrong date there, it is 1 week from Thanksgiving, Thursday, November 30th. And so make sure to join Rob Ray, who's CVP of Community currently at PAX 8. But he has seen so many things in the channel. So his perspective on what AI, what to do with it, what our clients are asking, I think is going to be really interesting. We're live every 2 weeks on MSP Mindset. You can join us at mspmindset.com/news to make sure you're in the know about all the new upcoming episodes. Follow us on LinkedIn. Join us on YouTube. Join us on Spotify or Apple or Google, wherever you podcast or social. And I will see you live in 2 weeks.